Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
The day I turned 28, I found out my mother had opened 4 credit lines in my name. I called her. She said, "I did it for this family. Everything I did was for the family." 7 years earlier I had started a folder. I called it insurance. The detective I hired called it evidence. The first thing I want you to understand is that I did not pull my credit report because I was suspicious of my mother. I pulled it because I was turning 21 and I had just accepted a position as a junior policy analyst at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute in Atlanta. And my supervisor, a methodical woman named Dr. Carol Osei, who believed that financial literacy was a professional obligation, had told every new hire in their first week to pull their credit report, review it, and bring any questions to her. It was routine. Administrative. The kind of task you complete between unpacking your desk supplies and learning where the printer paper is kept. I pulled the report on a Tuesday afternoon in September, sitting at my new desk, using annualcreditreport.com the way Dr. Osei had instructed. I entered my social security number, my date of birth, my current address in the East Lake neighborhood of Atlanta, the apartment I had moved into 6 weeks earlier with 2 suitcases and a second-hand bookshelf. The report loaded. There were 2 accounts I did not recognize. A Citibank credit card, opened 18 months earlier. Balance, $4,300. Payment status, 30 days late. A Capital One card, opened 2 years earlier. Balance, $7,100. Payment status, 60 days late. I read them twice. I read them a third time. I looked at the social security number at the top of the report to confirm it was mine. It was mine. I closed the browser. I sat for a moment at my new desk in my new job with my new supervisor's advice still fresh and the particular stillness of someone who has just seen something they cannot unsee. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it insurance. I pasted in a screenshot of the credit report. I dated it. I saved it. I did not call my mother that day. I needed to know more before I called anyone. I should tell you about my mother before I tell you what I found. Her name is Diane Pruitt. She is 56 now. She was 49 when I started the folder, 48 when she opened the first account in my name, though I would not know that timeline precisely for several years. She grew up in Macon, Georgia, the youngest of 4, and she has a quality that people in her orbit consistently misread as warmth, an extraordinary fluency in the language of sacrifice. Everything my mother did, she did for the family. This was the framework, the organizing principle, the sentence that preceded and followed every decision she made regardless of whether the decision actually served anyone but herself. She said it so often and with such genuine conviction that I spent most of my childhood believing it. The belief was not stupid. It was the natural consequence of being raised inside a story told by its only narrator. My father left when I was 9. Not dramatically, he simply receded the way certain people do until one day the recession was permanent. He sent money sporadically from Savannah, where he had built a separate life, and my mother raised me and my younger brother Caleb alone in the house on Summerhill Road in Atlanta. The house on Summerhill Road. I need you to hold that address. It becomes important. My mother worked as an office manager for a dental practice on Peachtree Road. She was good at her job, organized, personable, the kind of administrator who knows where everything is and how everything works and who quietly makes the office function while the dentists take the credit. She earned $52,000 a year. It was not nothing. It was also not enough for the life she had decided she was entitled to provide. He had credit cards. Several over the years, cycling through them the way people cycle through diets. Committed, then exhausted, then committed again to a new version of the same pattern. She had a home equity line. She had a car payment. She managed, in the way that people manage when management means the distance between the current crisis and the next one is always narrowing. I knew some of this. Children absorb financial anxiety the way they absorb secondhand smoke, without being told what it is, understanding that something in the air is not safe. What I did not know until I was 21 and sitting at a new desk with a clean credit report that wasn't clean, was that my mother had decided to solve her narrowing distance with my social security number. I did not call her for 3 days. In those 3 days I did the following. I filed a dispute with both credit bureaus flagging the accounts as potentially fraudulent. I requested the full account opening documentation from Citibank and Capital One, citing my rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, Something I knew how to do because Dr. Carol Osei had recommended a primer on consumer financial law in the same week she recommended the credit report pull. I received preliminary account documentation within 72 hours. The applications listed my name, my social security number, my date of birth. The mailing address on both accounts was 4417 Summerhill Road, Atlanta, Georgia. My childhood home. I sat with that for a while. Then I called her. She answered on the third ring. I told her what I had found. I told her the account numbers, the balances, the addresses. I was calm. I was specific. I did not cry. She said, "Layla, listen to me." I said, "I'm listening." Those accounts, that was years ago. I was in a position where I had no other options. I needed to keep the lights on. I needed to keep a roof over your brother's head. I did what I had to do. I said, "You opened credit cards in my name." "I paid them," she said. "For a long time I paid them. It was only the last few months when things got difficult." "They're 30 and 60 days late," I said. "Boss. I'm going to fix that." "They're in my name," I said. "My credit score has been affected since before I was old enough to apply for credit on my own." "Layla." Her voice shifted. The sacrifice register. The one I had grown up inside. "Everything I have done has been for this family. Everything. You have a roof over your head, you went to college, you have a job. None of that happens if I don't make the hard choices." I said, "Okay." She said, "Okay." I said, "I heard you." I hung up. I went back to the insurance folder. I added a new tab. Phone call September 14th. I typed her exact words. Every one of them. Then I went back to work. That was the beginning. What came next took 7 years, and I want to be precise about why it took that long. It took that long because I was building a career and a life and an understanding of what I had exactly and what it was worth and what it would cost me to use it. Reporting your mother to law enforcement at 21, before you understand the full scope of what she has done, before you have documentation sufficient to close every exit she might use. That is not justice. That is a warning shot. And warning shots in families like mine produce not accountability but escalation and erasure. I was not interested in a warning shot. I was interested in the complete picture. And the complete picture took time. I pulled my credit report every 6 months. I documented every change. Over the 7 years between 21 and 28, here is what I found in the order I found it. At 21, 2 accounts, combined balance $11,400, both late. At 22, a third account. A store credit card from Ashley Home Store. Balance $2,800. Opened when I was 19, 2 years before I had pulled the first report. 19 years old. I had been in my first year at Georgia State University. I had not bought furniture. At 23, I hired a credit monitoring service. $12 a month. Worth every cent. At 24, the monitoring service flagged a hard inquiry. A mortgage application. Lender. Southern Community Bank, Atlanta branch on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard. Applicant name, Layla Pruitt. Co-applicant name, Diane Pruitt. A mortgage application. I was 24 years old and my mother had submitted a joint mortgage application in both our names without my knowledge or consent. This is the moment the story changes size. I need to stop here because this is where I made the decision that determined everything that came after. I could have called the bank. I could have called a lawyer. I could have called the police. I called a private investigator instead. Her name was Teresa Van. She ran a one-woman operation called Van Investigative Services out of a second-floor office on Edgewood Avenue in Atlanta, above a dry-cleaning shop that smelled permanently of perk and steam. She was 52, former Fulton County Sheriff's Department, and she had the particular economy of movement and language that comes from years of watching situations from a distance before deciding how close to get. I found her through a paralegal I had befriended at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. A woman named Keisha Drummond who had used Teresa Van 2 years earlier in a landlord dispute and described her as the kind of person who finds things other people have decided are unfindable. I sat across from Teresa Van in her second-floor office on a Tuesday in February and I gave her the insurance folder. All of it. 3 years of it. She read it without expression. When she finished, she placed it on the desk. She said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to know everything." Not just what I can see from my credit report. Everything she's done, every account, every application, every property transaction connected to my name or my social security number. Everything. Teresa Van looked at me for a moment. She said, "That's a specific ask." I said, "I've been building toward it for 3 years." She said, "My rate is $85 an hour. A full financial identity audit takes between 40 and 60 hours depending on what's there." Pause. "Based on what you've shown me, I'd estimate 60. I said, "I have the money." She said, "You said the mortgage application was 2 years ago. Was the application approved?" I said, "I don't know. That's part of what I need to know." She nodded once. She pulled the folder toward her. She said, "I'll start Monday." Teresa Van worked for 11 weeks. During those 11 weeks I continued going to work. I had been promoted by then. Senior policy analyst, a small team of 3 focused on Medicaid expansion research. I was good at my job. I liked my job. I liked the particular discipline of it. The tracking of evidence, the construction of argument from documented fact. The understanding that a policy position is only as strong as what you can prove. Teresa called me every Friday with an update. Brief. No editorializing. Week 3. The mortgage application was approved. Southern Community Bank. April of 2019. Loan amount, $174,960. Property, 4417 Summerhill Road, Atlanta. I said, "That's the house I grew up in." "Yes," Teresa said. "Your mother already owned it. She refinanced it. The new loan is in both names, hers and yours. You are listed as co-borrower. Your credit was used to qualify for the lower rate." I said, "I never signed anything." "No," Teresa said. "You didn't." Week 5. 4th credit line confirmed. Personal loan from Marlin Finance opened when you were 19. $6,500. Paid off. But it's on your record. Week 7. View all 4. The second wave. Teresa said, "I need you to sit down for this one." I was already sitting. I said, "Tell me. Your social security number was used on a rental application in 2017. A property on Flat Shoals Avenue in Decatur. The application was in the name of Caleb Pruitt. Pause. Your brother." I did not say anything. "Your mother submitted the application," Teresa said. "Your brother was 19. He may or may not have known whose number was on the form. The rental was approved. Caleb lived there for 14 months. I said, "She used my number to get my brother an apartment." "Yes." I sat with that for a moment. The particular quality of a betrayal that has a second floor. The first floor is your mother. The second floor is that she used you to give your brother something she couldn't give you. A clean start, no questions, someone else's credit history standing in for his. I said, "Okay." Teresa said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Keep going." He kept going. Week 11. Teresa presented her final report in her office on Edgewood Avenue. It was 43 pages. Bound. Her name, her license number, her firm on the cover. She placed it on the desk between us. She said, "Summary. 4 credit accounts opened in your name between 2013 and 2016. Combined original principal, $22,600. 1 personal loan same period. 1 rental application in your name for a third party. 1 mortgage co-borrower designation, 2019, loan amount $174,960. Property 4417 Summerhill Road. Total financial exposure attached to your identity without consent, $197,560. $197,560. I looked at the number on the page. "The mortgage is the critical instrument," Teresa said. "It is active. It is current. Your mother has been making payments. But you are legally on the hook as co-borrower. If she stops paying, the default hits your credit. If she dies, the bank comes to you." She paused. "You are also potentially liable for property tax assessments on a home you do not live in and did not agree to co-own." I said, "What are my options?" Teresa said, "You have 2 primary paths. Civil. You sue for damages, seek to have your name removed from the mortgage through legal action, pursue restitution for the credit accounts. That is slower, expensive, and requires a civil attorney." She looked at me. "Or criminal." Identity theft in Georgia is a felony under OCGA Section 16-9-121. The use of your social security number without consent on a mortgage application is financial identity fraud. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office has a financial crimes unit. I have a contact there. A detective named Roy Sims. I said, "What does criminal get me?" "It gets your name off the mortgage," she said. "A fraud designation on the loan triggers a mandatory review. The bank has to reassess. In the meantime, your name is flagged as a fraud victim on the account, which protects you from default liability while the investigation is open." She paused. "It also gets your mother charged." I was quiet for a moment. Teresa said, "I want to be honest with you. I've done this a long time. A lot of people in your position stop here. The evidence is real, but the person who did it is their mother. That's a weight that doesn't go away." I said, "I know. What do you want to do?" I looked at the 43-page report on the desk. At the number. At 7 years of Fridays, of credit monitoring, of insurance becoming evidence. I said, "I want my name off that mortgage. And I want her to understand that she can't use me as a financial instrument and call it love." Teresa nodded once. She reached for her phone. She said, "I'll call Roy Sims." Detective Roy Sims worked financial crimes for the Fulton County DA's office out of a building on Pryor Street in downtown Atlanta. He was 47, ex-GBI, with the particular patience of an investigator who had learned that financial crime cases require more paperwork than dramatic moments and had made his peace with that ratio. Teresa brought me to his office on a Thursday morning. She placed her report on his desk. He read the summary pages. He asked 17 questions, methodical, specific, in the order a trained financial crimes investigator asks questions. I answered all 17. When he finished, he said, "This is solid documentation." Teresa said, "It is." He looked at me. "I want to be clear about the process. We open a formal investigation. We interview the subject, your mother. That interview happens at our request, not yours. You will not be in the room." I said, "Okay. If the interview produces what the documentation suggests it will produce, we proceed to the DA's office for charging consideration. The mortgage lender, Southern Community Bank, will be notified of the fraud designation on the account. Their fraud department will conduct their own parallel review." I said, "How long?" 6 to 12 weeks for the investigation. Charging decision adds 4 to 6 weeks. I said, "And my name on the mortgage?" "Once we notify Southern Community of the fraud designation, they are required to flag the account. Your liability protection activates at that point." He looked at the report again. "Given what's documented here, I'd expect that notification within 2 weeks of opening the investigation." He looked up at me. "Miss Pruitt, I want to ask you one question before we proceed, and you can answer however you want." I said, "Okay. Does your mother know you're here?" I said, "No." He nodded. "That's helpful. It means she hasn't had the opportunity to construct a version of events in advance." He picked up a pen. "We'll start Monday." My mother did not know I had hired Teresa Van. She did not know about the 43-page report. She did not know that Detective Roy Sims existed or that his number was now in my phone. She knew that I had found 2 accounts 7 years ago and called her about them, and she had said what she said and I had said okay, and that had been the last time we had discussed it directly. In the 7 years between that phone call and this Thursday morning, I had spoken to my mother approximately once a week. Sunday evenings usually. 15 minutes, 20 if there was something to discuss. Caleb's updates, a holiday plan, something she had seen on the news that she wanted to talk about. I had been to the house on Summerhill Road for Christmas, for her birthday, for Caleb's college graduation 2 years ago, at which she had introduced me to her friends as my daughter who works in policy, with the particular pride of someone who has decided proximity to achievement is the same as achievement. He had no idea what I was. What I was. A senior policy analyst with 7 years of documented financial crime evidence, a private investigator on retainer, and a contact at the Fulton County DA's Financial Crimes Unit. What she thought I was, the daughter who handled things quietly, who called on Sundays and came for Christmas and was, in the particular way she had always needed me to be, fine. I had been fine for a long time. I had been fine on purpose. I had been fine the way you are fine when you are building something and the building requires that no one see you building it until it is complete. It was complete now. Detective Sims called my mother on a Wednesday. He identified himself and his unit and requested that she come to the Prior Street office the following Monday for a voluntary interview regarding a financial investigation. She called me that same Wednesday evening at 7:14 p.m. She said, "Layla, I just got a call from someone at the DA's office. A detective. He wants to talk to me about a financial investigation." I said, "Okay." Pause. "Do you know what that's about?" I said, "I think you probably know what it's about, Mom." Silence. A long one. The kind that has weight. She said, "Layla, whatever you think happened." "I know what happened," I said. "I've known for 7 years. I've been documenting it for 7 years." Another silence. "The insurance folder," I said. "I named it that the day you told me everything you did was for the family. 7 years ago. It has 43 pages now. Teresa Van compiled it. She's a licensed private investigator. Detective Sims has the report." My mother said, "You hired." "I hired someone to document what you did," I said. "Because I needed it documented. Because $197,560 attached to my Social Security number without my consent is not something that stays in a Sunday phone call." She said, "I was going to fix it. You had 7 years. I needed more time." "You had 7 years," I said again. A very long silence. Then quietly, "Is there anything I can say?" I thought about that question. I thought about it carefully and without performance. I said, "You can go to the interview on Monday. You can be honest with Detective Sims. That's the only thing I can tell you to do right now." She said, "Layla, I'll call you Sunday," I said. "Like I always do." I hung up. My mother went to the interview on Monday. I know what happened in that room because Detective Sims called me afterward, the way he said he would, with a factual summary of what was relevant to the investigation's progress. He said, "She came in voluntarily. She had an attorney with her, a criminal defense attorney from Buckhead named Stephen Cole." I said, "That's good. That means she took it seriously." She did. Her attorney advised her to invoke on most of the specifics. But she made one statement on the record before invoking. He paused. She said, "I opened those accounts to keep my family together. Everything I did was for my children." I said, "She said exactly that." "Yes." The same sentence. 7 years later. Word for word. I said, "What happens next?" "The DA's office will review the documentation and her statement. Given the mortgage instrument, the co-borrower designation is the clearest legal exposure. I expect a charging recommendation within 4 to 6 weeks. Southern Community Bank has already been notified of the fraud designation. Your name is flagged as fraud victim on the account as of this morning." I said, "So I'm protected from the default liability?" "As of this morning, yes." "Thank you," I said. He said, "Miss Pruitt, I want to say one more thing." I said, "Okay." In 21 years of financial crimes work, I have not often seen a documentation file this thorough from a civilian. 7 years of consistent, organized, legally relevant documentation. Your investigator did excellent work. But the foundation was yours. Pause. "You built that." I said, "I had time." He said, "You had discipline." The charging decision came 6 weeks later. 3 counts of identity theft under OCGA Section 16-9-121. 1 count of financial identity fraud in connection with the mortgage application. My mother's attorney, Stephen Cole, negotiated with the DA's office over the following 8 weeks. What resulted was not a trial. What resulted was a plea agreement. 2 counts of identity theft reduced to misdemeanor financial fraud. A restitution order of $22,600 covering the credit account balances. A requirement to refinance the Summerhill Road property into her name alone within 90 days. And 3 years of supervised probation. My name came off the mortgage on a Tuesday in March. Southern Community Bank sent me a written confirmation. I printed it. I put it in the insurance folder under a tab I labeled Resolved. The credit accounts were disputed and removed over the following 6 months. My credit score, which had been suppressed by unauthorized derogatory marks since I was 19 years old, cleared to a number that reflected 9 years of my own actual financial behavior. I checked it on a Saturday morning. I sat with it for a while. Then I called Teresa Van. I told her the final score. She said, "Good." I said, "Thank you. For all of it." She said, "You did 7 years of the work. I did 11 weeks. I want to tell you about Caleb because I know you're wondering. My brother called me 3 weeks after my mother's interview. He said, I need to know if you knew about my apartment. The Flat Shoals place. I said, I found out during Teresa's investigation. He was quiet. Then, I didn't know whose number she used. I swear to you. She just said she had a contact who could help with the application. I was 19. I thought, I don't know what I thought. I said, I believe you. Are you okay? Yes. Are we okay? I thought about that. About Caleb, who is 25 now, who works at a logistics company in Smyrna and calls me on my birthday and had no idea that his apartment on Flat Shoals Avenue had been purchased with my credit history and my future. I said, we're okay. You didn't do this. She did. He said, she's my mom too. I know, I said. She's mine too. We talked for another 20 minutes. It was the longest conversation Caleb and I had had in years, and it was about real things, and at the end of it he said, what do I do now? With her. I said, that's yours to figure out. I can't tell you how to have a relationship with her. I can only tell you what I need from mine. He said, what do you need? I said, accountability. Not apology, she's apologized. Accountability. Which means she understands what she did well enough that she doesn't do a version of it again. He said, and if she doesn't get there? I said, then the door has a lock. And I'm the one who decides when it opens. I sent my mother one text, 6 weeks after the plea agreement was finalized. I had written it and rewritten it, and I want to read you the version I sent because it matters to get the words right. I'm not ending this. But I am changing the terms. You used me as a financial instrument for 9 years and called it love. I need you to understand the difference between those two things before we can be something real. The door is open. But it has a lock now, and the key is yours to earn. She read it. She did not respond for 11 days. On the 12th day she sent 3 words. I'm working on it. I don't know yet what that means. I don't know yet if working on it is the beginning of accountability or the beginning of a new version of the same story. I am watching. I am documenting the way I have always documented, not from suspicion now but from self-respect. From the understanding that I spent 28 years being the daughter who was fine, and I am done performing that particular role. I am not fine. I am something better than fine. I am clear. I am the one who built the folder. Who named it insurance. Who held it for 7 years until the right moment, the complete picture, the documentation sufficient to close every exit. The insurance folder is still on my laptop. I haven't deleted it. I probably won't. It is the most honest record of who I was required to be, and who I chose to become instead. I think that's worth keeping. Type never again in the comments if you know what it costs to stay quiet while you're building something. And if this story reached something real in you, I'd be honored to have you stay.